Hey everyone, welcome back to another Papo review. Today we'll be taking a look at their infamous 2020 Giganotosaurus. I ended up ordering this figure from Everything Dinosaur. It retails for just about $23. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to order this figure for yourself. So getting back to this Giganotosaurus, I think it's safe to say that this was probably the most talked about figure among the dinosaur toy collecting community this year. If you go on the dinosaur toy forum, every year they do a wish want list for the various toy companies. If you go back on the Papo wish list on the forums, go back years and years and years, the Giganotosaurus was at the top of a lot of people's lists for Papo to make. So when this figure was revealed earlier this year, it was not met with the warmest of receptions. I myself was not a fan when the first pictures came out. I just did not like the pose. It's a little too old school and retro, and I very rarely pick up figures I know I'm not going to like, but I feel like there was so much buzz around this figure, I had to pick it up and give it a fair review. So before we dive deeper into the review, let's just do a couple quick measurements. This figure is about 8 inches long from the tip of the tail to the tip of the snout, but if you measure it along the head all the way down the back and along the curve of the tail, the figure is actually 15 inches long. And the height is just a hair over 7 inches at the top of the neck right there. So Giganotosaurus is estimated to be between 39 and 43 feet long. So with that 15-inch measurement, that would put this figure somewhere in the 131 to the 135 scale range. So let's address the elephant in the room right off the bat. Let's talk about the pose of this thing. Like I said, I am not a fan of this old school retro pose, but I can see how this pose appeals to some people. It definitely does have a little charm to it, but for me, this is not what I was expecting when Papo announced their Giganotosaurus. I would think it would be more in a bipedal pose or that kind of weird tripod thing they did, like with the Gigantosaurus, with the figure resting on its front claws. I honestly would probably prefer this to be in the tripod pose if they were going to have trouble getting this balancing on 2 feet. The sculpting and paintwork are absolutely fantastic. You know, Papo does some of the best looking dinosaur figures in the business. Just the paint they use and the amount of detail it gives their figures a very lifelike look. And this Giganotosaurus is very lifelike to look at. So let's just go around the pose. It's very reminiscent of their original green standing T-Rex, except with the legs really splayed out in the back. It's just very awkward when you're looking at this thing from different angles. So I can definitely see why a lot of people, including myself, are just really disappointed with the pose. The paintwork is excellent on this figure. It's mostly a different mixtures of browns with some grays, but the washes and the mix of colors is really well done on this figure. It gives it a very lifelike look. The striping on the tail just looks like a little painted on. It looks like I actually did the paint work on this with just those gray stripes at the end of the tail. Right when it gets to about here is like when the paintwork looks kind of meh. But all in all, the paint on this figure is extremely well done. The washes really bring out all that beautiful scale detail on this figure. I think the head looks absolutely fantastic. Other than that, the tail right here, that's the only issue with the paint that I have. I think the figure is beautifully painted. So let's zoom in and take a look at that beautiful head sculpt on this figure. You can see there's some black paint around the eye. The eye is painted in yellow with a brown iris and a black pupil. You can clearly see the nostril sculpted in right there. There's a little bit of black paint in there to highlight the nostril. The teeth are beautifully painted. You can just see the gums peeking out right where the teeth end on the upper and lower jaws. The teeth feel nice and sharp, no sloppy paint. The teeth are beautifully painted. You have a nice wash along the gum tissue right there with a little bit of a glossy sheen to give it that lifelike look. And like most Papo theropod figures, the jaw is articulated. Papo has really mastered the articulated jaw. A lot of dinosaur toy companies wish they could do their articulated jaws as well as Papo does. And opening the mouth back up, you can see the tongue is beautifully textured. Let me just turn the figure over, and you can see inside the mouth right there. You can see some beautiful detail inside the mouth, even right there. I don't know if my light can pick it up. Right where the tongue is, you can see the opening to the throat, which is an awesome touch. And let's see what he looks like from the front. You get a little bit binocular vision. One eye is going the other way and one is going the other, so you got that nice little quasi chameleon look on this Giganotosaurus. But you know, when you have a nice close up like this, the model looks absolutely beautiful and fantastic. And going down to the rest of the body, you can see it has some really nicely sculpted pectoral muscles right here, some really nice scale detail along the chest and stomach. The arms are beautifully sculpted. The claws feel nice and sharp. They have a nice dark gray coat over them, some nice scale detail along the arms. The body, you can see the ribs just a little bit right here, but a lot of nice folds and wrinkles and scale detail. You have a nice row of osteoderms along the back right here. The main body is really well done, even all these nice wrinkles going down to the pelvic region. The leg is beautifully sculpted, a lot of nice muscle detail, a lot of nice folds, wrinkles, and scales. The hind feet are really, really nicely sculpted, a lot of beautiful scale details. A nice dark wash going over that to bring out all those scales. Same thing with the toe claws, they painted in a dark gray color. And then going down to the tail, you can see more of those osteoderms, and you can see more of just that gray paint. I just don't like the way it looks. It's just, like I said, it looks like just someone just got a brush and just painted it on haphazardly. But other than that, the paintwork, like I said, other than on the tail, is absolutely fantastic on this figure. I think the sculpting, the detail, and the paintwork are fantastic. The biggest knock against this thing is obviously the pose. All right, let's move on with some comparisons. Let's first start off with some Giganotosaurus from other toy companies. First up is the Safari Limited Giganotosaurus, which is in a much more naturalistic bipedal pose. I know a lot of people, including myself, would have liked to see this Giganotosaurus in a pose very similar to the Safari one. And next up is the highly regarded Eofauna Giganotosaurus, which is another absolutely fantastic looking figure. And lastly, for Giganotosaurus figures, here is the PNSO Giganotosaurus. I do have the Vitae Giganotosaurus, but I recently put it away and buried the box, and I'm not sure where I put it currently. When I eventually post pictures to my Instagram with all the compare this figure to the all the Giganotosaur figures, I will try to get the Vitae one out for that. So definitely go down in the description and check out my Instagram if you want to see that picture later on. And next up, let's compare it to some Papos. Here is their Spinosaurus. And here it is with their OG classic green standing T-Rex. You can see the pose is very, very similar between the two of them. This Giganotosaurus just lands slightly higher than their T-Rex, which is pretty cool because Giganotosaurus is supposed to be a little bit bigger than T-Rex. So I think these two figures posed like this actually look really, really good together. So you do have some display options when you're trying to display this guy on your shelf for your dinosaur collection. And next up is the green stand-in T-Rex, which shows you Papo can do bipedal figures very easily. And next up is last year's Gorgosaurus, their Cryolophosaurus from a few years ago, and their Ceratosaurus, which is technically a bipedal figure. If you look right here, that front hand claw is not touching the ground. And lastly, probably one of my favorite Papos of all time, their Acrocanthosaurus. And lastly, before I forget, here it is with the Papo Spinosaurus. You can still see the Papo Spinosaurus absolutely dwarfs this Giganotosaurus. So, final thoughts on this figure. The sculpting, paintwork, and detail of this figure are absolutely fantastic. I expect nothing less from Papo, but the pose, I can't stand the pose on this thing. It just doesn't work for me. I'm glad I picked the figure up just so I can look it over and see it, in person, but it is definitely not one of my favorite Papo figures. Now, if you happen to like this figure, that's fine. You're allowed to like what you want to like. Don't let anyone ever tell you what you should and shouldn't like. This is just my opinion. Don't let anyone else's opinion influence you. If you want to get this figure, go out and get it. These are just toys. There's no sense in arguing about it amongst yourself. There's so much going on in the world. There's just no need for arguing. But if you want your voice to be heard by Papo that you do not like this figure, this is going to sound very hypocritical, don't buy it. The easiest way to get a company's attention is to hit them in the wallet. If you don't like this figure, don't get it. If the sales are bad on it, maybe Papo will reevaluate their plans for the future and listen more to the collectors that these figures are obviously geared for. And like I said earlier, the link to Everything Dinosaur is just below if you want to order this figure for yourself. So this review kicks off a very big review week for me. I have a lot of new stuff coming in, so expect a lot of reviews on new figures coming up over the next couple of weeks. And remember, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, show your support by hitting that subscription button just below the video. Each subscription helps out the channel tremendously and is greatly appreciated, and I'll see you guys for the next one.